What's up, YouTube? Welcome back. I hope the new year is treating you well. So in this video, I want to do a review of a book that I read very recently called Darkism, 25 Ways Dark-Skinned People Are Discriminated Against by the world's first dark-skinned activist, Rashida Strober. I personally found out about Rashida Strober when she ended up going viral for calling out Kendrick Lamar because he announced that he was engaged, but the woman that he was engaged to, she was not a dark-skinned black woman with tightly textured hair, or as Rashida Strober specifically put it, non-dark-skinned. And I mentioned that particular phrase because Rashida took issue with the Breakfast Club misquoting her by saying, oh, she's angry that he's engaged to a light-skinned woman, when technically that's not what she said. She said non-dark-skinned. But, close enough for most people, right? So that's how I initially heard of Rashida Strober. Some people may have heard of her from her YouTube beef with Tommy Sotomayor, or perhaps some people may have heard of her from her strong accusations of plagiarism directed at other black female YouTubers, which I'll address later in this video. But back to the main topic of this video, which is the book Darkism, 25 Ways Dark-Skinned People Are Discriminated Against by Rashida Strober. So I'm going to do a review of the book and just give you my thoughts and opinions, and of course as well my reaction to the book. But before I begin my critique and my review, I do want to give a disclaimer, and that is, these are my thoughts and opinions. It is not my intention to try and speak as if I have the lived experience of a darker-skinned black person, and especially a darker-skinned black woman, because, of course, I do not. As well, it is not my intention to intentionally discount Rashida Strober's experiences. And I mention that part because a lot of the book centers on and draws from Rashida's experiences. My intent is to just give my point of view on the subject, as well to provide my opinion and take on, of course, Rashida Strober's book, as well as the subject matter in general. So with that all being said, let's get into it. So let's start with the front cover. So I noticed on the front cover that it says 25 ways dark-skinned people are discriminated against. And usually when I encounter the word dark-skinned, it's usually with like skin being spelled S-K-I-N-N-E-D and there being a hyphen between dark and skin, since it's being used as an adjective. And also I noticed throughout the book that it often switched between using dark skin as a adjective and also using dark-skinned as an adjective as well, but without the hyphen. So I say that to ultimately say that besides that spelling issue, throughout the book, there are at times some typos, some run-on sentences, some words and phrases being italicized when they shouldn't be. To put it simply and straightforward, let's just say that the book needs some proofreading. But of course, that doesn't mean that you don't have a good book. As well, those problems are technical problems that can be corrected within the next printing run of the book. But I also just noticed something on the cover. It looks like Rashida is wearing a seatbelt. And I just wonder what inspired her to use this particular photo of her wearing a seatbelt. Is it symbolic of something? Is she trying to send a message? And also the cover of the book, you do notice that there's like a contrast between light and dark. Perhaps more symbolism. But let's dive into this book. So the book, it sort of comes off more so as a diary or a journal, because Rashida, she draws a lot from her personal life, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but at times while reading it, you may think that because of the way that it's written, drawing so much from Rashida Strober's personal life and lived experiences, it may come off as if the book should be titled Darkism, 25 Ways Rashida Strober is Discriminated Against. But Rashida Strober, she does talk about some studies, but the thing is, she doesn't really cite the studies all that well. For example, she spoke about the differences in terms of prison sentences between darker-skinned Black people and lighter-skinned Black people, and she mentioned the study but didn't actually cite the study. And then there are situations where Rashida Strober, she does cite the study, but it's not cited that well. And I'm not talking about like MLA versus APA format. I'm talking about more so citing like the name of the study or the article, where it was published, or the publication where it was published, the year, issue number, the author, etc., like things like that, where you can easily say, okay, I see that this was cited as a source, and if I want to, I have all that I need to look up this source for myself. And that wasn't done in the book, like while you were reading the book, nor was it done at the end of the book. There's not a works cited page or a bibliography at the end of the book either. But in addition to Rashida's personal experiences, she also draws from like celebrities and like Hollywood, the entertainment industry, with examples like, like the original Aunt Viv versus her replacement. Or, it's tough for dark-skinned Black women in the music industry. And, for example, Kelly Rowland, Notori Naughton from 3LW. So the book relies heavily on Rashida Strober's personal experiences as well as public figures in the media, which is all right. But I do find it to be a bit odd that Rashida Strober would not use more sources to support her claims. And I find it strange because Rashida Strober, she does have a master's degree in political science from the University of South Florida. As well, she has a bachelor's degree in history, I believe from the same college as well. If I'm incorrect, please feel free to correct me on that. And she has talked about her education on occasions and is very proud of her education, as of course she should be. But I do feel like this was sort of a missed opportunity to draw on your education and the skills that you acquired from that education when it came to like writing research papers or writing her thesis on the impact of structural adjustment on health, education, and employment, a case study on Sierra Leone, for her master's degree. So because of that, I think that this book does miss the mark when it comes to being able to be used as a strong piece of academic literature. But on the other hand, this book could possibly be used in perhaps like literature classes. Maybe, like perhaps like African American literature classes that deal with colorism, or as Rashida refers to it, darkism. Which, by the way, I should have defined at the beginning of the video. So my apologies for that, but I'll define it now, just in case you may not know what exactly darkism is. But as Rashida defines darkism, quote unquote, darkism is the discrimination of a person based on the fact that they are dark-skinned. A darkist is a person who discriminates against a person who is dark-skinned. A darkist can be any color, race, or ethnicity. A darkist can even be a dark-skinned person who perpetuates darkism towards a fellow dark-skinned person. And that's the definition of darkism per Rashida Strober. As well, she credits herself for coming up with the name darkism, or the term darkism, being used in this particular context. I believe she says that she is the first person to use it in this particular context with this particular meaning. But back to the book. As far as the target audience or potential target audience for this book, again, perhaps literature classes that deal with African American literature that focuses on colorism issues, and just, of course, people in general who may be interested in the subject matter. And I believe that Rashida Strober has, her own niche following as well. That can be the target market for this book. So she starts the book with dedications. So she dedicated the book to her 2 children. She has a son and a daughter. And she also dedicated it to a lot more people too, but those were the first 2 people she dedicated the book to. And she also she gives some information on her backstory as well in the book. And she also gives a disclaimer in this book, which is that she uses the word nappy multiple times in the book, although for her, it's not a negative word. And I'll quote her here, and she says the following. Although many have used the word nappy to negatively describe black hair, I do not view the word nappy in a derogatory sense. In addition, my use of the word nappy is used to juxtapose it to popular conceptions of so-called good hair atop the heads of so-called acceptable-looking black people. End quote. She also talks about why she decided to write this book, which is, quote unquote, one of the most important reasons why this book is needed is because a book of this nature has never been written before. Darkism is breaking brand new ground as the first book of its kind. And then she goes into like the 25 ways in which darkism could potentially occur. One way is like being called jealous and bitter. She also talks about how black people, or people in the music industry in general, may sort of use dark-skinned women's, intellectual property and creativity and even be fans of it. And she cited an example of this with Lauryn Hill and how, there are many black men who have cited Lauryn Hill as being an influence and as being, great at what she does. But she also said that, well, these men don't put dark-skinned women in their music videos, nor do they marry dark-skinned women. So, Rashida, she's calling it out. She also touches on, who is considered to be pretty versus ugly. And she feels like when it comes to who is considered ugly and pretty, you can be as ugly, ghetto, ratchet, and manly as you want. Just don't be dark-skinned with it. That's how she views it because of her personal experiences. She also touched on a situation that occurred where she was teaching while dark-skinned, and she was in some class in grade school as a substitute teacher, and some boy who I believe was dark-skinned as well made a dark-skinned joke about her, and then folks laughed, including another teacher, and she was not appreciative of that. She also called out BET for not having a lot of dark-skinned black female hosts. And during section 6, called Too Dark-Skinned for Elite Status, she mentioned, Claudette Colvin and Rosa Parks, and talking about how Rosa Parks was pushed more to the front to be seen as like the leader or a civil rights leader versus Claudette Colvin. And she feels that it's because Claudette Colvin was dark-skinned, and she says that they use her pregnancy as just an excuse. It's really because she was dark-skinned. And personally, I think that it was in part because of her pregnancy and also because I believe she was a teenager too. And I don't think we should be pushing teenagers to be like the face of like political movements. She has enough to worry about just dealing with her own situation. I don't think she should take on having to save the community as well. But of course, she should, she deserves her credit. And ultimately, she did get her credit. A man ended up writing a book about, her situation. And, she was able to get some notoriety off of that. She also talks about being fired from, I believe, a nursing home for not smiling enough despite doing a good job. And she feels like it's because she was dark-skinned. And she also feels like if you're dark-skinned, you have to be extra smiley and cheerful because people are going to just assume that you mean and angry and got an attitude. And she also speaks about how people assume that because you're dark-skinned, that you're broke. And she mentioned how a non-black man followed her around his store. But the thing is, one thing that I do notice in the book is that sometimes I feel like some of these situations could be attributed more towards racism versus darkism or colorism, at least when we're talking about people outside of the community. Rashida also talks about being overqualified for a position and paid less than her non-black, dark-skinned female counterparts. And I'll give a quote. Quote unquote, I have a master's degree. Neither of my white supervisors had a master's degree. Yet, they were paid more than me. We all did the same work. In addition, we were all to be paid bonuses based upon the number of people we hired. This fact was kept from me for months, thereby denying me money that I was entitled to based on bonuses that I should have received. Like, for example, that example, I would attribute that more towards racism versus darkism, unless there was another person who was also black but perhaps was being treated better because they were maybe lighter skinned. And she also talks about how one day out of the blue, a supervisor who was a white woman told her, Rashida, that her husband told her while they were lying in bed that Rashida Strober's dark skin was so beautiful. And Rashida Strober could tell that she, the white woman supervisor, did not like that. And she feels like this factored into kind of like the interactions that she had with that particular coworker, specifically the negative interactions that she's had with that coworker. But regarding her intelligence, Rashida says the following, quote unquote, I'm a dark-skinned, nappy-headed female with a master's degree. Deal with it. This is what I feel like telling people who look at me and judge me thinking I'm ignorant for no other reason than me being a dark-skinned black woman. And then she also mentions Barack Obama and feeling like he was a beneficiary of light-skin privilege and he being incorrectly named the first black president, where she feels like he should be named the first biracial president. And of course, feeling like if he did not have his white lineage, he probably would not have become president. And she also goes on to talk about in part 14, Too Dark for TV, about, the lack of darker skinned black women on television and just in the media in general. This, of course, angers Rashida because she feels like this shows that raw talent is not needed. And as well, Rashida Strober is a actress. She's very much into acting. That is a passion of hers. It's at one point was so much of a passion that she ended up moving to Los Angeles to pursue it. And I commend her for, taking a chance like that, taking a leap of faith like that, and just going for it. And I'm sure she could probably write a book just on that experience alone of, her pounding the pavement and trying to make a name for herself in Hollywood as a dark-skinned black woman. And she also talks about, in a chapter, I believe chapter 17, too dark to be adopted, right? Too dark to get adopted. Saying that darker skinned children have a harder time being adopted. And I think this is one of the examples where it's like, okay, that's a serious accusation. And it's not that I don't necessarily believe what she's saying, but it's like when you say things like that, you kind of expect some sort of data or some study to back up a claim like that. But I didn't see anything. And she also talks about, her dating as a darker skinned black woman and how when she was younger, I believe when she was a teenager and she would kind of like quote unquote date, she would avoid telling boys that she was dark skinned. And I know you may be thinking, well, how does that work? How could she avoid telling someone that she's dark skinned when they just see that she's dark skinned? Well, the thing is, it was like they were kind of like talking over the phone and it was kind of like a blind date sort of setup. And she felt like things were going well many times until she mentioned that she was dark skinned, and she felt like that's when things started to go downhill. So because of that, she just avoided telling people that she was dark skinned. I'm not sure how those relationships turned out. I don't think that they would turn out pretty good if you have to essentially hide a big part of who you are physically. And she also touches on the stereotype of, darker skinned people. I feel like some of these stereotypes, though, kind of just go to black people in general. But she's saying it more so as colorism or darkism. Like, for example, being stereotyped as like dark, loud, violent. Also, the unacceptable dark-skinned black woman, where she talks about how it's like, oh, if you have like a loosely textured hair, then it's cool. It's okay. It's more acceptable to be darker skinned, right? Especially with like certain features, like facial features as well. And she cites like Tatiana Ali, Ananda Lewis, Chili from TLC, etc. And I feel like there is some truth in that. She also touches on people thinking that darker skinned people are too, quote unquote, dumb and dark to invent anything. Although that wasn't strongly substantiated. She mentioned herself and Claudette Colvin again, but didn't really mention any other example outside of that. She also talks about like the black and ugly jokes that some people tell. And she cites some examples in the media like Pam from the TV show Martin and Fred and Aunt Esther from Sanford and Son. And she also makes a bold statement that, quote unquote, you can be ugly as all outdoors in the black community and get away with it as long as you are not dark skinned. She also touches on welfare queens and how she feels that people are nicer to like non-dark skinned people who have fallen on hard times versus dark skinned black women. And I'll say this is one of those examples where I feel like it may be an issue of racism as well, because I do think that black women in general carry that stereotype of being welfare queens, courtesy of the Moynihan Report. And she also talks about how, these people at the welfare office or the food stamps office or, the Office of Health and Human Services, when they're talking with other non-black people, they're all cheery and happy to help. But when they get to her, the attitude change and they acting like they don't want to be happy and cheery all of a sudden. She also mentions prison punishment and how that plays out while being dark skinned. But the thing is, like another example, this is a great moment where using and citing, studies or data would really come in handy. And she did mention a study, but I don't think she cited the study the best way or in the best way. For example, quote unquote, a Villanova University study showed that dark-skinned women serve more prison time than their non-dark-skinned counterparts. The thing is, she didn't really specify, the name of this study, the author, where this study was published, the year, issue number perhaps, etc. It was just a Villanova University study. And I'm pretty sure that Villanova University has plenty of studies. And the last reason, or way rather, number 25 of, darker skinned people being discriminated against is stereotyped as ignorant and violent in movies and TV. And she pretty much just talks about Kid and Play in their movie and how one was portrayed versus the other. That's it. So, those are the 25 reasons. However, Rashida does provide a potential solution for the situation. And it's not extremely long and it's pretty straight to the point, so I'll just read her solution. Quote unquote, we must institute a complete and total re-education of all people of African descent, starting with the children. Also, black men must come back to dark-skinned women in balanced numbers. The black man can solve most of the dark-skinned issues in regards to dark-skinned female beauty right now by marrying and dating more dark-skinned women. Also, all dark-skinned people should be made wealthy in every corner of the earth. Economic equality is at the root cause of the dark-skinned issue. Write me and tell me your solutions for ending darkism. And the book also provides some information on how to book Rashida Strober if you're interested in her speaking at your engagement or event or perhaps performing. And also the book provides more information on Rashida Strober, such as her background and her resume, her activism, her acting, her education, her advocacy, community service, etc. And she also provides a glossary of the terms and phrases that she uses in the book. Like, for example, darkism, or darkest, or dark-skin activism, dark-skin activists, dark-skin guilt, dark-skin heckler, dark-skin mental abuse, dark-skin supremacy, equalizing the beauty of dark skin, imposed inferior beauty position, leveling the beauty playing field, non-dark skin, post-traumatic dark skin syndrome, systemic economic darkism, world's first dark skin activist, attractiveness war, beauty bargaining power, beauty positioning. And there you have it. That's pretty much the end of the book. And Rashida asks and requests some donations. Contribute today. The Dark Skin is Beautiful campaign needs your ongoing support to continue its initiatives around the world. And these initiatives are the following. The campaign needs to reach $1 million in order to produce plays and live shows about Darkism on the Darkism World Tour. B, a building needs to be purchased to house dark-skinned activist studios, where plays, shows, Darkism talks, and creative works will be produced and broadcast live stream around the world. And if you would like to gift a property to house the dark-skinned activist studios or contribute funds toward the purchase, please call the number that she listed, and please email her at the email that was listed. So that's my review and breakdown of Rashida Strober's book, Darkism, 25 Ways Dark-Skinned People Are Discriminated Against. But before I end this video, I do want to touch on something that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, which is Rashida Strober's views on other dark-skinned women, especially on YouTube, who talk about colorism. So Rashida Strober feels more or less that it's her lane. She's the one who created the lane, and thus she is the only one who can speak on colorism topics, at least from a dark-skinned woman's perspective, or perhaps just altogether. And I don't agree with that for a few reasons. One reason is that I don't think that Rashida Strober invented the lane for colorism and darkism conversations. That's not to take away from, the work that she's done, of course. But these conversations were being had before Rashida Strober came on the scene. Like, Alice Walker, for instance, she coined the phrase or the term colorism. Spike Lee with School Days. Also, Wallace Thurman's book from 1929, The Blacker the Berry, that details the struggles of a dark-skinned young woman discriminated against by non-dark-skinned Black people in her life and throughout different aspects and parts of her life. So, long story short, I don't think that's Rashida Strober is correct in her view of being the only dark-skinned Black woman that should talk about dark-skinned Black female issues, colorism, darkism. And I believe at one point Rashida Strober has even said that she has invented dark skin and that she owns it. Like, she invented dark skin itself and that she owns it. Of course, that's not true, but I think comments like that may cause people to take a step back. Also, she has attacked some Black female celebrities who have spoken out about colorism, like Amara La Negra and Lupita. And she was saying, like, without Rashida, there would be no Lupita. She even made a song about it called No Rashida, No Lupita. And the way that comes off as if, she paved the way for Lupita to make it big and become successful in the entertainment industry. And she also has attacked some YouTubers with, like, darkest pejoratives. Like, for example, the YouTuber Fresh from Fresh and Fit. She referred to him as being, quote unquote, like a burnt crispy biscuit multiple times because she was upset with Fresh and Fit's views on not dating Black women. She also had like a beef with Tommy Sotomayor that ended up going to court. I don't fault her for that particular situation. So I will put that out there to add a bit more balance to what I'm talking about. But she also referred to a particular Black woman YouTuber who's very, very, very popular in the colorism conversation on YouTube as quote unquote crispy. And sort of using that and playing on that name in part because it sounds similar to the name that she uses on YouTube. And of course, that type of behavior, it does come off as if, you kind of have a mentality that, there can only be one, that token mentality, that scarcity mindset, where it's like, oh, only me. It's only me. No one else can do it. Just me. And it's like, well, other people have experiences too that they want to talk about, for one. Also, it's like saying someone owns the conversation about racism. Like that's just not true because it's just so pervasive. How could you? And I think it's more or less the same with colorism. Also, like, if it were to happen where Rashida Strober would be the only person who would be able to talk about colorism, like, who carry on the mantle once you're gone? Because, we're all going to end up leaving at one point or another eventually. And she also even kind of went after Tasha K for a quick second, too. She was like, don't be going in my lane, Tasha K, because I think she got wind that Tasha K was talking about maybe her experiences as like a darker skinned black woman, which I've never seen, I never heard, but I would be interested in hearing what she has to say about it. And as well, I think that, the mindset of being like, oh, I'm the only one who can talk about it, I don't think it does your fellow dark-skinned black women, sisters, any favors. In fact, I think it's a disservice to them. But all in all, I hope that Rashida doesn't view this as being like an attack on her or anything like that. It's more so just, something to think about. Because from what I heard, like one of the people that she ended up criticizing and accusing of like stealing her lane and plagiarizing her, well, for one, they did respond to it and gave a thorough response, rebuting or giving a rebuttal to their accusations. And also, they had even said that, before all the accusations happened, they were going to feature you on their platform. And I think that there may be I hate to say it, but I do think there may be a bit of jealousy, because it's like maybe you feel like you should be in the position that that particular YouTuber is in. And as well, when it comes to the plagiarism accusations, when I listen to black female YouTubers who speak about colorism, I feel like you get a different point of view and a different style and a different vibe from each person. I didn't listen to a particular YouTuber and be like, hey, this is like Rashida Strober, because Rashida Strober has her style and the other people have their style too. But of course, I believe she has also even threatened legal action over this. I don't know how far this is going to go, but if you can't have community with fellow activists, or even just people who you share a common experience with, if you can't have community with those particular people, then that's strange. That's odd to me. But I'm going to bring this video to a close. Thank you very much for watching. Please let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section below. Until the next video, adios and goodbye for now. Well, I guess one more thing I can speak on right quick is in regards to the book, is that the book isn't like super long. I believe the book is about probably between 115 and 120 pages. And the writing style is pretty simple and straightforward. You don't have to be like a college professor with a PhD from Harvard to read this, thankfully. But again, thank you for watching this video. Please let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section below. Until the next video, adios and goodbye for now.